In 2015, the most expensive fighter jet ever built lost a dogfight, not to a Russian Su-57, not to a Chinese J-20, to an F-16, a jet designed in 1974. The pilot's own report said the F-35 couldn't raise its nose fast enough to even attempt a shot. The U.S. Air Force spent $1.7 trillion on a fighter that loses to the jet it was built to replace. And here's the thing. That wasn't an accident. The real story of why is one of the most deliberately misunderstood engineering decisions in modern military history. The most dangerous fighter jet on Earth. And it can't win a fair fight. The F-16 Fighting Falcon entered service in 1978. It was built for one thing: to outturn, outclimb, and outgun anything in the sky at close range. It's small, light, and aggressive. Fighter pilots love it. The F-35 Lightning II was supposed to replace it. A faster electronics, stealth, next-generation sensors, the future. Most people look at this story and reach one conclusion: that the F-35 is a bloated, over-budget failure. Lockheed Martin took Pentagon money and delivered a compromised jet. That somewhere, bureaucrats made bad decisions and pilots paid the price. That conclusion is completely wrong. The F-35's inability to dogfight isn't a flaw. It's the entire point of the aircraft. It was engineered from day one to never be in a dogfight in the first place. But here's where it gets strange, because the engineering that makes it invisible also makes it physically incapable of surviving if that plan ever fails. What makes this even stranger is the helmet. The F-35's helmet-mounted display is the most expensive pilot helmet ever manufactured, $400,000 per unit. It's so heavy that ejection seat engineers had to run studies on whether the neck vertebrae of an average pilot could survive a high-speed ejection without spinal injury. The helmet that is supposed to give a pilot godlike situational awareness might also break their neck on the way out. That's the F-35 in one image. Extraordinary capability, extraordinary cost, and one critical assumption that if it breaks everything else with it. To understand what was traded away, you need to understand what stealth actually costs. Radar works by bouncing radio waves off a surface and measuring the reflection. A large, flat surface, like a wing, bounces waves straight back to the radar antenna. Easy to detect. Stealth engineers solve this with two tools. First, shape. You angle every surface so radar waves deflect away, but never back to the source. Second, material. You coat the airframe in RAM, radar-absorbent material, a substance that converts radar energy into heat instead of reflecting it. Both of these tools have a price. Shaping an airframe for stealth means you can't shape it for aerodynamic efficiency. The sharp, swept wings that generate maximum lift at high angles of attack, the geometry that lets an F-16 pull 9 Gs and keep turning, those shapes bounce radar like a mirror. The F-35's wing is a carefully blended, rounded shape, beautiful for stealth, mediocre for maneuvering. Then there's the weight. External missiles and bombs reflect enormous amounts of radar. So the F-35 carries all its weapons internally, inside a bay cut into the fuselage. That bay adds structural weight. The doors that seal it add mechanical complexity. The smooth external surface adds RAM coating weight. The F-35 weighs nearly 10,000 pounds more than the F-16 when empty. In a turning fight, every one of those pounds is fighting the pilot. Think of it this way. Wing loading is the ratio of an aircraft's weight to its wing area. It's the single number that predicts how tightly a jet can turn. The F-16's wing loading at combat weight sits around 88 pounds per square foot. The F-35's is closer to 107. Higher wing loading means a wider turn radius. A wider turn radius means you're always on the outside of the circle. And in a dogfight, the outside of the circle is where people die. Here's the physics trap. The F-35 does have a sharp instantaneous turn rate, that first violent snap of the nose. The fly-by-wire system is modern, the control surfaces are powerful, and for 1 second, the jet can point its nose aggressively. But sustaining that turn, keeping the energy up lap after lap of the fight, requires thrust to overcome drag and gravity. The F-35A's thrust-to-weight ratio at combat weight is approximately 0.87. The F-16's is 1.09. Once the F-35 bleeds its energy in that first hard turn, it can't rebuild fast enough. The gap compounds every second. After 30 seconds of turning combat, an F-16 pilot has geometrically positioned themselves behind an F-35 that has no answer left. It feels like the problem has no solution. And honestly, it doesn't. Not in a turning fight. The solution is to never be in one. This is where the F-35's designers made a bet. Their argument was simple. The era of turning dogfights, 2 jets inside 1 mile, guns blazing, was over. Modern beyond visual range missiles, combined with sensor fusion, meant the F-35 would kill its enemies at 60, 80, 100 miles. The enemy would never know the F-35 was there. The F-35's primary weapon isn't its GAU-22 cannon, it's the AN/APG-81 AESA radar, an active electronically scanned array so powerful it can track dozens of targets simultaneously while also jamming enemy radar on the same antenna. Combined with that radar is something called DAS, the Distributed Aperture System. 6 infrared cameras embedded flush into the F-35's airframe, covering every angle simultaneously. The pilot, wearing that $400,000 helmet, can look down through the floor of the aircraft, look backward through the rear fuselage, see a heat signature from a missile launch 50 miles away. No fighter in history has had anything like it. And this is the misconception correction. The F-35 is not a worse F-16. It is not a fighter that failed to compete. It is a completely different category of aircraft. It is a flying sensor node, a data fusion computer that happens to carry missiles, a platform designed to win wars by making the close-range fight irrelevant. At beyond visual range, the F-35 is nearly impossible to defeat. Its radar cross-section is approximately that of a metal golf ball, around 0.001 square meters, compared to roughly 5 square meters for an F-16. An enemy radar can't see it until it's far too late to react. By the time an adversary's radar picks up the F-35 is already fired, already turned cold, already disappeared. The gun, those 182 rounds, is a last resort, a self-defense system for a scenario that was never supposed to happen. But the number that really puts this into perspective is 300 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the temperature the F-35's outer skin reaches when it sustains Mach 1.6, its maximum speed. At those temperatures, the RAM coating, the material that makes the aircraft invisible, begins to physically degrade. The F-35 cannot fly fast for extended periods without destroying its own stealth. The aircraft's greatest weapon is its invisibility. And speed is its enemy. It was designed for the patient, invisible hunter, not the knife fight. And this is where the story gets genuinely extraordinary. Because this has happened before. In 1965, the U.S. Navy and Air Force went to war in Vietnam with the F-4 Phantom, the most advanced fighter of its era, fast, powerful, built on the same assumption that beyond visual range missiles had made dogfighting obsolete. The F-4 was actually sent to war without a gun, because guns were the past, missiles were the future. Then North Vietnamese MiG-17, older, slower, cheaper jets, began outturning F-4s in close combat. A jet designed in the early 1950s was humiliating America's most modern fighter. The kill ratio in 1965 was barely 2-to-1. Fighter doctrine demanded 10-to-1. The U.S. Navy's response was to found the Naval Fighter Weapons School, Top Gun, a program built entirely around one premise. How do you train pilots to survive in a jet that wasn't built for the fight they're in? 50 years later, we're in the same position. The F-35 is the F-4 Phantom of the 21st century, optimized for the war we expect, potentially exposed in the war we get. The difference is that the USAF knows it. Red flag exercises specifically test F-35 pilots against close-range threats. The program exists not to pretend the dogfight problem doesn't exist, but to train around it. The F-35's designers didn't fail to build a dogfighter. They made a calculated bet that the dogfight era is over. History will decide if they were right. The F-35 is not a failed fighter. It is the most capable sensor platform ever put in the sky, engineered to make every previous generation of air combat doctrine obsolete. But it carries inside it a single, brutal assumption that no enemy will ever force it into a turning fight. Here's the question I want you to think about, and I want your actual answer in the comments. Given that peer adversaries like China and Russia specifically train their pilots to force BVR-capable jets into close-range combat, was trading dogfight performance for stealth the right call? Or did America just spend $1.7 trillion building a jet that loses the one fight it might actually face?